So
okay. Hi, everybody. This is Steve Hargadon. It's 16th of April, 2009, Thursday night. This is the Classroom 2.0 research report. Thanks for coming out tonight. We have Turadg and April with us, although right now we've only got Turadg, so when April comes, he's going to have to run and open the door of the building for her. If you haven't been in Illuminate before, and it looks like a few people are in that category, and you think you might want to ask a question through the microphone, you can go up to Tools, Audio, and run the Audio Setup Wizard, and that will test to make sure that your audio is okay. And you can do that and still be listening to the session now, so feel free to go ahead and do that. If you're new here as well, I'll describe the environment for you. There's a participant window, and you can see the people who are in the session, and you can, below that, there's some emoticons or icons that allow you to clap, or to smile in approval, or to say you're confused, or to express your disappointment. You can also raise your hand. That's the hand with the green arrow up. When you do that, we can give you the mic when it's an appropriate time. You'll see below in the audio area that you have a button to push to click. This is like a walkie-talkie kind of audio. So we do ask that you raise your hand before you talk, just because some people don't have echo cancellation on their systems, and we'll hear an echo. You can put your questions or comments in the chat window. You'll also notice that next to the send button, you can actually send private messages to other people in the chat. But do be aware that because Turadg and April and I are set up as moderators, we actually see all of those messages, so there's nothing completely private. Well, good. So we're sure glad to have you here tonight. This is very fun for me. I'm very interested to hear what kind of information's been gathered and what stage they're at. Back in April, Turadg and April asked me if they could initiate a research project on Classroom 2.0. They wanted to figure out why it was a thriving online community for educators. So I guess the question is, are we still thriving, and how have we changed? And maybe they can't address that fully, but they've taken a slice of time and can tell us what they found out so far. Their goal has been to provide a formal analysis to help policymakers and future researchers support these kind of communities in the best ways. And they've called this project Understanding Classroom 2.0, or UC2. So we had a community meeting at the very beginning to make sure that the community felt comfortable with somebody drilling down on the network like they were going to, and we had a lot of positive response. So this is kind of a chance for initial reporting, or reporting back. I guess this is our second reporting session. So, Turadg, do you want to start, and then just let us know when you need to go get April?
Sure. Yeah. So this is really an interim report. We don't have any conclusions. Oh, that's April. Hold on. Hello.
So while he's getting the door and getting April, feel free to put in the chat what city you're from, and are you coming in from, and what the time and temperature are there. That's often fun to see. And then when he gets back, we'll ask about how many of you have actually been were in one of the previous sessions that he held. I get the sense that not many. Anthony's in Oakland. Washington, 64 today. Yeah, we're going to get almost record highs in the Sacramento area this weekend.
Here we are.
New York. Oh, good. So ask everybody where they were from. Hi, April.
Hello.
Oh, Turkey.
So we asked them where they were from and what the temperature was today. So far, it looks like fairly good weather everywhere.
Yeah, even in Pittsburgh.
Oddly enough.
Oh, fun. Okay, so did you want me to ask how many people had been in a previous session where we talked about this research?
Yeah, I'd like to know. Kind of, we're really curious. I remember there were a lot of researchers last time. I'm wondering how many of them are back, or yeah.
Any new ones?
Yeah, and how many?
So let's ask. So let's ask the question of who was in the previous session with Turadg in April, and if you were, you can click on the green check that is up above on the top bar of your screen. The green check would indicate that you were here before. A red X would indicate that you were not.
Okay, so a lot of new people.
I'm not seeing anybody who is actually
I
here
thought I saw
before.
one. Oh,
No,
that's you.
That's me.
Okay.
So the question was if someone asked if I'd repeat the question. So the question was, were you in a session before on this research report? We held a live session like this, and if you were, just put a green check. Click on the green check, which will put a green check next to your name. And we actually have one. Martos is showing, having been attended the session before.
I think it's our first report. We had one session where we kind of proposed the work.
Yeah, kind of an introductory session with the other one.
Yeah. So I'm reading green check mark as someone who was in that introductory session. Okay, so Martos. Well, then that helps us so that we can.
Maybe we should start from the beginning then.
Yeah, we'll start from the beginning. What our goals are. They're kind of summarized on that web page that was linked to in Steve's email. But we're trying. This is a year-long project in our at CMU here. There's a program for interdisciplinary education research. So I'm in human-computer interaction.
And I'm in statistics.
And we're kind of feeling out what is something that we can do that draws on both of our skills. So it's a research question. It's also sort of pedagogical for us about how to put these things together, these skills together. So when we're bouncing around ideas, we came upon Classroom 2.0 and thought it was a really remarkable example of social networking for education, and we wanted to figure out what's happening there and what tools can we make and capitalize on to describe it kind of formally. You want to?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's also some really interesting ideas here for education. That being that a lot of states are creating their own networks for teachers in the state, or cities are doing this. I know Denver's done one. South Carolina tried to get money from their state legislature to put something like this together on Blackboard. And before they spend all this money putting those together, it might be nice to have some information on how people use existing networks and what sorts of information they're actually getting. So we're looking at the social network connections, who's connecting to who, and a big part of what I've been doing is some content analysis to try and get a big picture on what content is flowing and who it's flowing between.
Right. So we've taken it. If you look at that web page that Steve just put up, there's the topic modeling section, which is the using some pretty cutting-edge statistics.
It's pretty recent. That model, the latent virtually allocation, was developed, I think, in 2000. There have been a few advances with it, but pretty recent.
So that's taking all the words in the site and looking at how that, well, you can describe it much better.
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
I'm sick, so I'm trying to let Turadg do most of the talking. So the way the model works is, if you saw the example post there, every post that's part of the network is presumed to be a mixture of topics. And so one post might be about teacher preparation and technology and how that fits. And that, or another post might be a mix of two topics, like I need help, so that help request is one topic, and then if they need help with blogging or getting their students to blog, that would be another topic. So a post that, how do I help set up some student blogs, would be a mix of those two topics.
So now that we have this sort of computable definition of whether a post is in one of these topics and how much it's in one of these topics.
Right. The example there is 70% from presentation media. Other posts might be more 50-50 between two things.
Right. So we're taking that and so we just came up with this data like earlier in the week. So we've still got to do analysis on like what's the distribution of different posts.
Actually, today I just finished getting the same model fit to the rest of the data.
Okay.
So the question would then be, these are the topics that we see in the forum discussions. Do we see the same topics in comments that people leave on each other's homepages?
Like the wall post.
The wall posts. So how much do the topics that we see in one area overlap with the topics that we see in another area? Or are people using the two different areas for two different purposes?
Right, so that's one hypothesis test.
That's your question?
Oh.
So that's me demonstrating how to raise your hand. So I do have a question.
I don't want to just ramble. That was a great time for a question.
Okay, so one of the things I remember us talking about was that the network could be used by different audiences for different purposes. Meaning some may be their introduction to Web 2.0 and they're just signing up. For others it's kind of a Facebook use. I'm going to connect with other educators, so I'm going to use the wall post as my primary means of communicating. For others, it will be I want to get into the Q&A side. Have you discovered anything that's helped to understand that so far?
That's actually what I was just trying to say is we're kind of in the middle of that. So I fit the model for the forum discussions, and then trying to see if the same model describes the wall posts, wall comments, and I've got numbers for that, but I haven't yet pulled comprehensible information out of the numbers yet. So that's where that is.
Right. And so from some preliminary pieces of it, like not formal, but just looking through the data, we had the same intuition about the wall posts being more for personal communication. And so we're looking to validate that through this analysis. And also kind of, I've got some numbers, I've got some numbers on the participation and like how many people use just wall posts versus the forum activity, and can you tell me? So yeah, let me look those up. I should have put them in that document.
So while you're doing that, I can tell you that we get somewhere between, say, 4,000 and 5,000 visitors a day, about half of whom have been there before. And so, one of the things that I'm very interested in, and I'm not sure you're going to address specifically, but is we have a large number of people who visit for the first time who don't actually join. And what we've done is by making the network public so that people could see the discussions, the decision was basically we want this to be a way for people who've never seen something like this before to see its value. And by not requiring them to register, we know we're going to lose some number of people who don't actually end up registering. But we know that a large number come to the site and never actually register.
If I recall correctly, Turadg is looking up the numbers right now, but there was a large number who did register but still didn't do much of anything.
And I would actually expect that to be pretty substantial, because if you figure that you have maybe 2,500 returning visitors a day out of 21,000, that's, I don't know how to measure that, but certainly some large percentage of people are not coming back daily or regularly. And that would neither good or bad, just for the description of how people use the network. Another interesting point for me, I think specifically, is that I'm going to imagine that there's been a change from 2 years ago or a year and a half ago to current, because the growth of numbers in the network means that it's a very different experience. It's much less personal. So I'm going to guess that a lot of people have kind of gone off who really wanted sort of more personal experiences, still are members of Classroom 2.0, but have gone off and created their own networks or participated in other ways where they get a more personal experience.
Yeah, and we're finding, we haven't been able, it's kind of out of our scope to look into those other projects, but in doing the social network analysis, which we'll talk a little bit more about soon, there were a lot of people who had friends, being friends outside of Classroom 2.0. So I imagine that's some of those other networks spawning off.
I just noticed a question from Demet. See, I really like that you've tried to categorize the topics into sections, but I was thinking if there might be other posts later that would not fall into these categories. Okay, that's me not describing how the model works very well. The way the model is fit, I didn't come up with these topics. These topics, what the statistical model does is it looks through, basically it looks through all the posts and it looks for words that appear together. And so if people use words like how do I, and it really appears together a lot, or my students are working on a project and we're looking for collaboration partners, that's a pattern that's very strong, and we'll see it, and it'll appear in a lot of posts with those 5 or 6 words together. The statistical model picks up on those patterns, and what I get as output is lists of words that commonly appear together, and then I can look at those words and I can try and put titles on them. So when I see a list of words that's how do I convert, help, please, assist, then I'm going to call that looking for help or help seeking. If I see a list of words that is students, project, collaboration, looking for, then I'll probably call that collaboration seeking. So does that help clarify how the model is actually working? Okay, so Peggy. All the words will appear in all the categories, so each topic is, I'm trying to not get too technical, but each topic is a probability distribution over all the words that people have ever used. But so in like the student blogging, the high probability, the high frequency words are blogging, student blog, WordPress, words like that. Whereas words like Google would be very low probability. But it's still, all the words are still in all the topics. It's just a matter of which ones are high frequency, that they appear together a lot.
That's together.
Together.
So do more people utilize Classroom 2.0 during school breaks? We have that data, but we haven't looked at that question.
Membership jumps. There have been big membership jumps in like August, September, and I think smaller ones in December.
So how do we answer the hand raise?
So that's me again. So you just say, Steve, you can talk now. So I want to share with you, I opened my Google Analytics account, and I want to share you'll see that this is going to come up. This is actually the Google Analytics report from when Classroom 2.0 started. Yeah, or at least for when I started actually tracking analytics. And something happened. So are you seeing the Google Analytics dashboard?
Yes.
Okay, so you can see this shows overall 1 million visits, 3.5 million page views over the course of the 2 years. And then what I can do is, this will probably respond slowly, but I will actually go here and show you. This has a very pretty standard weekly pattern, and it doesn't tell me time of day, but it shows me every week there's this wave cycle, and it's been increasing, but it still stays cyclical, and indicates certain days. We'll look and see what days they actually are more prevalent. The really high peak that you see is from Christmas break. So that was an indication that during some break periods, I think Classroom 2.0 got a lot of publicity that people held off on looking at it till they had a break and then looked over Christmas break. But keep talking, you guys, and I'll go ahead, and this will take a second, but I'm actually going to change the date for the report just for the last month.
I also have, when you're ready, I have some statistics, a little Venn diagram of how people participate in the different types of interactions. So there's, well, I can tell you.
Can you upload that?
Yeah, it's in the URL. So.
Okay.
So the question in the chat is, how do I think it will be in the summer? And I can, if we look at last year, it actually went up in the summer. So maybe that would be an indication for Professional Development Network that's going to see time when people will see an increase of time when people actually have time to look at it.
Well, I think that also we remember we were seeing all of those instances of people joining in groups. My favorite example is like the 50 people from all over Pennsylvania that joined in the space of 10 minutes. And the only reasonable explanation for that was some sort of workshop. Sorry. And so with those, at least with the workshops, I would definitely expect an increase over the summer.
So we unfortunately we don't have the data that are in Google Analytics with visits, but we have finer grained data on what people are doing once they're registered. And I think I can.
But we don't have any satisfaction data. I know there was a question about that.
Oh. How have you determined your participant subject groups? Well, so right now everyone on the site everyone who has an account on the site is part of the data set.
As of different.
Right. As of November, which is when we were able to grab the data. Steve, can I switch over to a web URL?
Yeah, in fact, we can do both. This is about to populate. So what I'll do is I'll take this off. We can come back to it, and I'm interested that it looks like of those 3-point-something million people, 2.8 million of those page views have actually been in the last month. But you can see the cycle there, the definite kind of cycle. Well, looks like the dates aren't correct. Anyway, I'll come back to that, but you can begin to see the cycle, and then you can go ahead and start the web tour. And you do that by clicking on that globe up at the top and putting in the URL.
So it's not much of a tour. It's just a graphic here showing the blue circle is people who've made a colleague, or a friend, and the green circle is whether they've commented on a thread, like in the forum, and the orange is whether they commented on another user, like a wall post. So it's interesting that the forum and user wall activity is pretty much the same, dominated by making a colleague, which I can tell you the numbers on that. So out of 14,249 members, which is how many were registered when we got the data, only 25% ever commented on another user, and 23% commented on a thread. 12% commented on a thread more than once, but 65% have a colleague, so that's more than who've ever kind of posted or written on the site. But there are 35 people with over 1,000 colleagues, so there's definitely some. Sorry, I just noticed that some people can't see it. That's because it's an SVG graphic. Let me see if I can.
So Turadg, go ahead and share your desktop, which you do by click on the icon at the top with a hand underneath the screen.
Okay. Hand underneath.
In your top row of icons. To the left of the film icon.
Gotcha. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Select which application to share.
You show your email.
Did I share? I shared the chart.
Okay, so I'm seeing the chart now.
Okay, great.
I'm not seeing any numbers on it, though.
No, it doesn't have numbers. I'm just saying the numbers. This is just to get a quick visual on the relative.
Pretty recent.
Yeah. But there are so the orange circle of people who commented on a user, that's 3,500 users, which is about 25%. Comment on a thread is 3,200 users. And having a colleague is 65%. So it's worth noting that a colleague relationship is mutual. So that means there's half as many actual colleague relationships, let's say.
So what does that tell you?
Sorry?
So what is your conclusion from that?
That's just exploratory.
What it does inform a little bit of the content analysis, because if you look at the green circle and the orange circle, they overlap less than 50%. And looking at the numbers from a little farther away, but so most of the people who comment in the forums aren't commenting on the walls, and so that's mounting evidence that there's two separate networks and there may be two separate sets of content.
Right. What does it say about those of us who utilize Classroom 2.0? So one hypothesis is that in kind of social psychology theory around online communities, there's two different kinds of relationships people have with the online community. One is identity-based, that it's sort of they share a purpose with the people in the community, and the other is bond-based, that they're in the community because of their connections to other people who are in the community. And we're kind of seeing the wall post as a indication of this. We need to validate it through the word analysis that April was explaining, and social network mapping. But the kind of rough idea right now is that there's these people who are participating in the community through this bond-based interaction, that they're there to interact with certain people who they know and they've developed relationships with. And there's another set of people who are interested in the information that's there and aren't as concerned with who's providing it. They're just trying to learn and share. So Peggy asks, will you be able to see if there is more communication within groups or general forums? Yeah, we will be able to see that. We looked into the group feature, and there didn't seem to be very much activity. But do you recall? Yeah.
No.
Yeah, the general forum is what just eyeballing it, but we could certainly not just answer which is more, but we could look at the relative use of both of them. Might be interesting to see whether some people use mostly the forums instead of or mostly the groups instead of the forums. Maybe if they feel like it's a safer space to start out in. Yeah, I do have that information. I can look at it for you. Dual distribution.
While you're waiting, I put up the I went and did a report from November 1st till April 15th. So part of what's interesting here, I think, is to see the drop in usage at the beginning of December, which I'm assuming just means everybody's crazy busy. And then
at the end of the semester, final.
Right. Then the increase of usage toward the end of the month and the beginning of January, and then kind of stabilizing out. And then you can see that pattern, that very interesting pattern of it looks like Monday, Tuesday, or Monday, Tuesday. Yeah, Monday is clearly the high, and the low seems to be Saturdays. So that's fascinating to me. Saturday is low, Sunday is not much higher. So more participation during the week than on the weekends, especially at the beginning of the week.
Yeah, Steve O.C., I would guess that this is a pattern consistent across.
Yeah, that would be my. It's exactly the opposite of some other sites, like crack sites and things.
So to answer Ghost Librarian's question about the comments per user, I can quickly tell you, users commenting on other users, the three-quarters of people have never commented on a user, but someone commented on 1,000 different users.
Or maybe 1,000 different comments.
Well, that's
wow.
Yeah, that's
one person.
There are some that we've encountered. There are a few kind of spammer people on the network.
There's different types of spam. It's very odd. It's not like spam in the normal sense. It's somebody getting on at midnight from China and looking for other people who are online and leaving comments on all of their walls. Hi, I'm looking for somebody to practice my English with. So it's still spam, but it's a very weird kind of spam.
So just looking at the people commenting in the forums, so 11,000 of the 14,000 something users haven't commented in the forums, but 2,700 have, which is about 19%, and then 830 have done a lot of commenting on the forums. I forget what I meant by a lot.
I think you meant more than 2, if you took it as a 90th quantile.
Yeah, no, it's 96.
Okay, so it's like
17 or something.
Yeah.
And that pattern holds up with the the wall comments as well. It's almost exactly the same numbers, which is suggested by that Venn diagram we showed you. But it's interesting that the relationship holds even at the high level of comments. Scratch that last part.
Turadg doesn't always say it anymore. Are there any other questions?
I'm going to make a comment though on this lurker thing that's being discussed in the chat, because part of what we've always hoped Classroom 2.0 would do is just provide an example of social networking that was very educationally driven. So I don't think it's ever really bothered me that people come in and don't actually participate, because I think we knew that getting educators to participate wasn't necessarily going to be easy. The thing I always talk about is how when you've measured other people by their written output, how scary it can be to actually produce written output that you think is going to be permanent. So it doesn't bother me to have low participation numbers. Is anybody else bothered by it, or how do we react to that?
Well, are they even really low? These are thousands of people.
I think it's actually typical. I mean, my advisor, when we started this project, we told him there were 12,000 people on the network, which was the case when we got our data. And he's like, well, I'd expect a tiny fraction of them to actually be participating. And so when we found out that about half, I think, isn't it about half, 6,000, had done something on the network,
yeah.
He thought that was a really high percentage.
So that's actually really encouraging, because if anything, I would have expected us to even be behind general averages because of fear about social networking and education. But what you're saying is that somehow we've had a pretty decent participation rate when you look at this within the context of social networks.
Yeah.
And yeah, it would be interesting, because Steve, you have statistics on how many people. I think you were just saying it earlier, so I was forgetting. But how many unique visitors the site has had? Do you have some sense of the rate, the probability that any visitor will become a member?
I don't think I've ever done that. But if you look and say, okay, so let's say we have on average 4,000 visitors a day, half of whom are returning. So let's say that's 2,000 people returning on average. So that's 2,000 new visitors, and we maybe now get between 100 and 200 new signups a day. So maybe that's 1/10 of the visitors are actually signing up. That's very unscientific.
That's pretty high too. Let's see for figures now. Oh, thanks. Oh, Yardi. Thanks, Yardi. Sorry, I laughed because Yardi's a colleague in online community research. Welcome.
You mean you've got a ringer in the crowd?
Apparently.
Yeah, feeding hard data. Well, I'm happy to keep exploring these implications for some of the numbers. I don't know if there's other. We could also take a tour of the Google Earth visualization.
That's pretty cool.
Which is just, yeah. There's not much to conclude from it, but it's kind of fun.
Well, no, actually, there was one interesting conclusion that goes and shows
the distance.
Yeah, the distance thing.
Yeah, and I have that program.
Yeah, so go ahead and share your desktop. I think that'll be the best way. Or we can do a web tour and ask people to download it and do it on their own. But this is an AVI file, right?
Yeah. I think it's easier.
There's an AVI that you can watch on your own, but if we share it, then we can all go through it together. So I'll click that hand again.
And I can say that, Turadg, in April, your names came up when I was talking to SRI, the people with tapped in.
Oh yeah, Peggy.
So obviously your work, will have an impact on how those of us who are creating social networks look at what they can accomplish. And And I'm definitely in the amateur category. I mean, when I talk to the folks at SRI, they're drilling down at a level at which I just don't know. I'm operating on, on gut and duct tape. And they're obviously, really trying to look at the educational implications, the pedagogy, and trying to figure all that out. But I would say the answer to Peggy's question is, yeah, the outcome probably will shed some light on effective models.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, you just have an intuition or something about how to make these really successful, and so we're just trying to figure out what you've been doing.
Well, I don't know about you, Turadg, but what I feel like is sometimes we come back with, I've done all the statistical analysis, and I'm like, okay, I've got this, and this, and we lay it before you, and you're like, oh, yeah, I guess I knew that. So you've already intuited a lot of the things that we're picking up with these big tools.
So,
I guess my answer to that is it's hard not to be sort of actively involved in a network and have some sense of what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think I've told you before, I think I've been served very well by my 4.5 years of leading group tours. I was never in a classroom, but probably the classroom environment would do the same thing. You kind of get a sense of group dynamics. And this is on a much larger scale, but certainly it's been very interesting for me to watch this progress and I guess intuit some of what's taking place where you're actually looking at hard numbers. That's really helpful.
Yeah, so we're a good team. Here, can everyone see the Google Earth visualization now? You should see North America. All right. So this little dot here,
It's Steve, right?
that's Steve in Redwood, I think. So, because he was the first user, and we're at time 0 right now. Oh, Lincoln, sorry. And I'm going to drag this bar to increase the time window we're looking at, and now you see there's these users around North America. You can zoom out, and if you look at the whole world, there's not really, well, Europe.
No, there's an Australian.
There's an Australian, okay.
So give us a second, because every time you use shift views it lags. So I'm just now seeing a clear Australia.
Okay, let me move back to North America. This is an animation, so it might not work out very well.
So I'm currently seeing North America.
Okay, so I'm going to hit the play button, and this is over a window of a day where people are signing up. Is the frame rate working out, or is it just kind of a blur?
No, it's working, but it's not a day. It's obviously there's a slide for each day.
Yeah, well, I'm saying each frame is a span of time that
gotcha.
This little controller here, so I can make it bigger, but it's kind of interesting to see it flicker around.
Zoom in on somewhere like Colorado or Pennsylvania.
Colorado, I'm thinking is there's a graduate program there that James Folkstad's involved with. If you're seeing a high rate of people signing up from Colorado, I'm going to guess it's from his program there. Or in Pennsylvania, you've got a couple of really active educational or 2.0 folks.
Yeah. Well, what's very interesting watching this is that there's bursts. And so, Colorado Springs and Denver both, you'll see bursts of people. Turadg has got a pretty big window right now.
Yeah.
Trying to get down, you can probably see the burst.
And then it's also interesting to see.
I would love to look at Europe and Australia as well. Now, is this
people in the ocean, or the people who just give us any location?
Yeah, so this isn't everybody. This is just people who type the location in the location field that we can make sense of. People who typed the location in the location field that we couldn't make sense of ended up at 00 latitude, longitude. And people who didn't put in a location at all aren't appearing on the map.
And people who gave us limited amount of information, like people who only said Spain, for example, wind up in the geographic center.
Right. If they said U.S., they end up in the middle of Kansas, which might be a good point to switch to. Here's a cumulative visualization with height bars. And it's not the best visualization because if people are adjacent, they'll end up, but adjacent but not the same, they'll end up spreading out into two different stacks.
But still gives you some visual view of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
So you can see that London has a lot. So let's compare it to the U.S. over here. So these would be higher if they were fatter too, because along here you see lots of short ones, and that's sort of taking away from the height of the highest. The very highest you can see is Kansas.
Those are the people who only gave us the United States as their location.
Right.
A lot of them.
So Ning has since improved on its ability to ask people to put in specific locations. So my guess is that if you ever take a slice of data again from Classroom 2.0, it's going to be more informative. I also think one of the things that it tells us is that Ning's not really built to do certain things. So it is particularly difficult because Ning doesn't have a great categorization functionality for signups.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Ning doesn't make this data available anymore.
They said they were planning on making it available. That utility hasn't reauthorized.
Yeah.
Well, before we were able to email them and get permission to get the data, do you think we could do that again?
Yeah. So Classroom 2.0 is that door is still open to get the data, but one, it's not all the data, and we won't be able to do it for the other. If we wanted to do it for the networks that you spawn, we'd have to ask permission for each of those individually. Whereas we're hoping that at some point they let people get to their data again.
So I'd like to take advantage of this audience to ask one question specifically, which is, are there social networks that you go to, now that many of us are involved in different social networks, where you really like the experience that you have in the network? Classroom 2.0 is pretty hard for me to look at objectively, in part because there, a limited amount of time, and I sort of have to self-justify with regard to how I set up the features and organize the functionality. But are there other sites that you go to for social networking where you really like the features and or the layout? And if you put that in the chat, that would really help me, because I'm very interested in particular in, are we learning something now about the user experience which we can use as we develop new systems? And for me in particular, Learn Central, the new network I'm working on. And while any of you are making notes of those networks, if you want to ask any questions, this is a good time, certainly. If you have any more comments about the site or what we've learned in 2 years about social networking, it'd be fun to hear from you. We have probably about 10 more minutes to go.
Here's while you guys are talking, I'll just put up another thing to look at. Is here are arcs from when a user has commented on another user.
Hey, Gail, would you mind putting, is Teacher Leaders Network Forum a Ning network or another network, do you know? Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Interesting how our sense of what a social network is changing as well with Twitter. Good comment about using RSS. Yeah, a lot of us don't actually go into the network all the time. We're using RSS or email to sort what we do.
Responding to Demet, the location is based on what people put in their location field of their profile.
Yeah, I agree with you, Peggy. So we're thinking of doing a show for. Go ahead.
I'm curious whether people who use other teaching sites or other similar sites to Classroom 2.0 carry information back and forth between them. Like somebody may find out on one site, do they share it on another one?
Or just provide a link because that's easier.
Yeah, or a link. Listservs. Let's see. Yeah, so that's something that I don't know how it. Well, I guess
the link actually appears as a strong enough pattern in that LBA. Here, click on this, check this out. That appears as a pattern.
Yeah. We can parse out those links.
So one of the shows that we're thinking of doing on an upcoming Saturday with Peggy, Lorna, and Kim is a show just on how you manage the information you have from the social communities you're a part of. So sort of a success strategies for coping. And that came up because I've changed my strategy in the last couple of weeks in a way that's really helped me be more productive in my social networking areas. And I'm curious if the other people are finding similar ways to still feel productive but not be overwhelmed. Yeah, well, it's easy to be overwhelmed. Do we have a date, Peggy, yet for that show? Yeah, I'll say, Durf, that one of the things that I'm thinking, that I recognize as well is I kind of like the little emotional jolt every, 10 or 20 minutes of allowing the interruptions. But in terms of productivity, I'm finding that if I can give up the immediate reward, that I'm much more productive if I check, every 2 or 3 hours and have a systematic way of checking. Good. So can you give us a timeline of when you think it would be good to hear back from you again, or when you'll be producing material that we can read?
So we have a report mid-May. Is that right, April?
May 14th is when I have to tell the statistics department what I've done.
Right. So there'll be something out of that, which might be kind of esoteric.
Yeah. Then we have to tell IES what we've done mid-June. It's beginning of June.
Oh, right. And so we'll have a poster out of that could summarize the findings. And then we're slated to do this a year from when we started, which was August, September.
The final project wrap-up for the peer program will be.
Yeah, so that'll be a report in kind of written for an education audience, education research audience. Psychologists, yeah, versus statisticians. And we'd be able to come back and share that. Probably what we do at that point is share the report and maybe have a discussion a discussion happen in the forums, and then follow up with the most interesting points that people have brought up, and have more of a dialogue. Yeah.
So that'd be really great. I'd love to get that follow up. Yeah, another question for the group would be: have these live events had an impact on our time and/or our interest in the social networking? Are they an extension of social networking? How do they fit in? And Classroom 2.0 has utilized them pretty extensively. Does that make a difference? Is it a positive? Is it just more stuff you don't have time for? Oh, that's a yes, it's with exclamation marks. Thanks, Howie. I feel better. Okay, so that's been really fun. I think those of you who are here tonight, sure appreciate you attending. Probably interesting to you as well. Fun to show. I didn't realize how fun it would be for you to see the Google Analytics reports, but I'm glad to share that, and would be glad to do it again. Turadg and April, thanks so much for all you're doing. A lot of fun to hear from you.
Thanks everyone for coming, and thanks for having us, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, have a great night, everybody. I'll stick around if there are any more questions, but probably in about 5 minutes I'll turn everything off.
I have to run to something, so I'm signing off, and thanks everyone. Good night.
Okay, thanks.